Kier adjusted the environmental controls of his exosuit as another gust of Javira's copper-tinted wind hammered against him. The planet's twin suns pierced through the metallic haze, casting twisted shadows across the jagged landscape. Towering rock spires stretched toward the sky like ancient fingers, their surfaces scarred by millennia of savage windstorms. "Simple delivery job, my ass," he muttered, checking the artifact's containment unit, strapped to his back for the 100th time. "The payment better be worth trudging through this wasteland." His heads-up display flashed a warning, atmospheric toxicity levels rising. Kier ducked behind a crystalline formation, its surface refracting light in dizzying patterns. He traversed worse planets during his years as a mercenary, but something about Javira set his nerves on edge. Maybe it was the way the wind seemed to whisper, or how the rocks pulsed with an inner light he couldn't quite explain. The client's instructions had been specific: deliver the artifact to the coordinates, collect payment, leave. No questions asked. But after 15 years of running jobs across the galaxy, Kier knew that no questions asked usually meant shit's about to go sideways. A distant sound caught his attention, the distinctive whine of gravity boots. Multiple sets. Kier activated his suit's tactical overlay, counting at least 6 signatures moving fast across the terrain. Not toward him, but converging on something or someone else. Not my problem, he reminded himself, but his hand already rested on his pulse rifle. The movement patterns were too coordinated for random travelers. Hunters, most likely. A flash of green caught his eye through a gap in the rocks. A figure sprinted across the sand, long silver hair streaming behind them. A woman, her skin the color of jade, wearing what looked like ceremonial robes. Severian, definitely local. Something at her throat gleamed, an amulet that seemed to pulse in time with the strange light in the rocks. The hunters weren't far behind, their tactical gear marking them as off-worlders. One raised what looked like a primitive bow, and Kier's combat instincts kicked in before his brain could object. "Down!" he shouted, breaking cover and sprinting toward the woman. She turned, eyes widening. They were solid black, like polished obsidian, as Kier tackled her behind a rock formation. Arrows whistled through the air where she'd been standing moments before. "Stay here," he growled, but she grabbed his arm. Her touch sent an electric shock through his suit systems. "They want the amulet," she said, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. "I cannot let them take it." "Lady, I'm not here to—" Kier's response cut short as more arrows rained down. One pierced his suit's shoulder joint, sending warning signals across his HUD. Pain flared, but something else accompanied it. A surge of pleasure? His vision blurred as conflicting sensations warred in his nervous system. The woman stared at him, head tilted in fascination. "You would take my pain? Freely?" Her fingers traced the arrow shaft, and Kier gasped as another wave of impossible sensation washed over him. How curious. Your kind usually fears such things. "What the hell are you talking about?" Kier managed through gritted teeth. More arrows struck, finding gaps in his armor. Each impact brought that same devastating mixture of agony and ecstasy. His training screamed at him to fall back, to get clear, but his body refused to move away from her. She smiled, and something in Kier's chest tightened. "I am Marissa," she said, as casual as if they were meeting at a dinner party rather than under fire. "And you, stranger, have just complicated everything." An explosion rocked their cover, showering them with crystalline shards. Kier's tactical overlay identified energy weapons powering up. These hunters were done playing with primitive weapons. "We need to move," he said, checking his pulse rifle's charge. "Those aren't just arrows anymore." "Yes," Orissa agreed, but her attention seemed focused on the wounds in his suit. "Your pain, it resonates differently, almost like—" Another blast cut her off. Kier grabbed her arm, ignoring the jolt of sensation the contact caused. Philosophy later. Running now. He fired several covering shots, forcing the hunters to scatter. "There's a ravine 200 meters east. Might lose them in the crystal formations." They sprinted across the open ground, energy bolts sizzling past them. Kier's suit screamed warnings about structural integrity, but each hit only heightened the strange euphoria flooding his system. He felt simultaneously more alive and more unfocused than he'd ever been in combat. "The artifact you carry," Orissa said as they ran, somehow not even breathing hard. "It belongs with this." She touched the amulet at her throat. "That's why they sent you here." "Lady, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just the delivery boy." But even as he said it, Kier felt the containment unit on his back pulse in sync with her amulet. They reached the ravine's edge. Below, massive crystal formations created a maze of reflective surfaces and sharp angles. Perfect for losing pursuers, deadly for anyone who didn't watch their step. "Trust me?" Orissa asked, extending her hand. "Absolutely not," Kier replied, but took it anyway. The moment their fingers touched, that impossible sensation intensified. He could feel her pulse through his suit's sensors, could sense her excitement, and was she actually enjoying this? They descended into the crystal maze, Orissa moving with the certainty of someone who knew every treacherous path. The hunters' shouts echoed behind them, but the crystalline structures distorted sound, making it impossible to pinpoint their location. "You're bleeding," Orissa observed, glancing at where several arrows still protruded from his suit. "Yeah, that tends to happen when you jump in front of arrows." Kier tried to focus on their escape route, but his vision kept blurring. The pain should have been debilitating, yet somehow it felt transformative. Orissa stopped suddenly, pressing him against a crystal wall. The contact sent sparks through his neural interface. "Why did you?" she asked, those black eyes searching his face through his visor. "Help me? Take my pain?" "I didn't take anything," Kier said, but even he heard the uncertainty in his voice. "And I don't make a habit of watching people get shot." "No," she smiled, tracing one of his wounds again. The gesture should have been agonizing. Instead, Kier had to bite back a moan. "You're a protector, despite all your efforts to pretend otherwise. You don't know anything about me." "I know your pain now," she whispered, "and you know mine. On Shavira, that means something." Before Kier could respond, energy fire erupted around them. The hunters had found their position. Orissa pulled him deeper into the maze, and Kier found himself following, even as his rational mind screamed that he was abandoning his mission. Risking his life for a stranger, breaking every rule he'd set for himself over the years. But with each step, with each fresh surge of that impossible pleasure pain, one thought crystallized. He'd already crossed a line, and there would be no going back. The crystal maze opened into a vast underground cavern, its ceiling studded with bioluminescent crystals that cast an ethereal blue glow. Kier's suit continued to flash warnings about his injuries, but the pain had transformed into something else entirely. A humming energy that made every nerve ending sing. "We should be safe here for now," Orissa said, leading him to a shallow pool of iridescent water. "Your wounds need attention." "I've had worse," Kier replied, but his legs betrayed him, buckling as he tried to sit. Orissa caught him with surprising strength. "Remove your helmet," she instructed. "The air is clean here." Kier hesitated. "Last time I checked, Zavira's atmosphere was toxic. To outsiders, yes, but these sanctuaries are different." She gestured to the crystals above. "They purify the air, among other things." Against his better judgment, Kier disengaged his helmet. The air that filled his lungs was sweet and cool, carrying an electric charge that made his skin tingle. Or maybe that was just Orissa's proximity as she helped him remove the damaged sections of his suit. "You're taking this whole running from armed hunters thing pretty well," he observed as she examined his wounds. Her fingers traced the edge of an arrow wound, sending shivers down his spine. "Pain is different for my people. We experience it as energy, as power." She met his eyes. "As pleasure when we choose." "That explains some things," Kier muttered, remembering the impossible sensations from earlier. "And the amulet?" Orissa's hand went to her throat, where the strange pendant pulsed with inner light. "It is called the Heart of Zavira, one of several artifacts that maintain the balance of our world's energy." Her eyes flickered to the containment unit, still strapped to his back. "Like the one you carry. Look, I was hired to deliver this thing to specific coordinates. That's all I know." "The coordinates would have led you to a trap," she said simply. "The invaders who hunt us, they seek to destroy our connection to Zavira's power. They cannot understand it, so they fear it." Kier watched as she dipped her hands in the glowing pool, then pressed them to his wounds. Instead of pain, he felt a surge of warmth that bordered on ecstasy. "And what makes you think I can understand it?" Her smile held secrets. "Because you already have begun to. Your body responds to our energy. The artifacts recognize you." She leaned closer, her breath ghosting across his skin. "Tell me, Kier of Earth, when was the last time you truly felt anything?" The question struck deeper than any arrow. Years of carefully maintained emotional distance crumbled under her obsidian gaze. "That's not fair." "No?" Her fingers traced an old scar on his shoulder. "Your body carries so many stories of pain, but you've never learned to transform it, have you? You've only learned to bury it." "Some things are better buried," Kier said, but his voice lacked conviction as Arissa's hands continued their exploration of his scars. Each touch sent waves of sensation through him that made it hard to think straight. "The invaders believe the same," she replied. "They see our connection to pain as a weakness to be eliminated. But they don't understand. True strength comes from transformation, not denial." A distant explosion echoed through the cavern. Kier instinctively reached for his weapon, but Arissa caught his hand. "We have time," she said. "The maze will keep them confused for hours. And you need to heal. What I need is to figure out what I've gotten myself into." But he didn't pull away from her touch. "Why did they send me here with this artifact if they just planned to ambush me?" Arissa's fingers intertwined with his, sending sparks of pleasure pain up his arm. "Because they didn't expect you to find me first. The artifacts are drawn to each other, and to those who can channel their power." "I'm no channeler," Kier scoffed. "I'm just a guy with bad luck and questionable career choices." Her laugh was like crystal chimes. "Is that what you tell yourself?" She pressed her palm to his chest over his heart. "Then why does your energy sing to mine?" The contact sent a surge through him that nearly took his breath away. Kier grabbed her wrist, intending to push her away, but instead found himself pulling her closer. That's just your alien voodoo." "Is it?" She didn't resist his grip, but somehow he felt like she was the one in control. "Or is it because, for the first time in years, you're allowing yourself to feel?" Their faces were inches apart now. Kier could see flecks of silver in her black eyes, like stars in a midnight sky. "Feeling things tends to get people killed in my line of work." "And not feeling?" Her free hand traced the line of his jaw. "What does that cost you?" Before he could answer, the cavern trembled. Dust and crystal shards rained down as another explosion rocked the sanctuary. Arissa finally pulled away, her expression turning serious. "They're using mining charges," she said. "They'll bring down the whole system to find us." She stood, offering her hand. "We need to reach the inner sanctum. My people will be waiting." Kier took her hand, trying to ignore how natural it felt. "And if they've been compromised too? Then we'll face that together." Her smile held a challenge. "Unless you're planning to run?" "Lady, I think we both know I'm in too deep to run now." He checked his weapon charge, grateful for something familiar to focus on. "But when this is over, you're explaining exactly what's happening to me." "When this is over," she stepped close again, her lips brushing his ear, "I'll show you exactly what you're capable of feeling." The promise in her voice sent a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with alien energy. As they made their way deeper into the cavern system, Kier realized he was looking forward to collecting on that promise, assuming they survived long enough. The deeper they ventured into the cavern network, the more intense the connection between them grew. Each crystal chamber they passed seemed to amplify whatever was building between them. Kier found himself hyper-aware of every move Arissa made, every casual brush of their bodies as they navigated the narrow passages. "Your heart rate is elevated," Arissa observed during a brief rest, her hand resting on his chest. The simple contact sent waves of pleasure through his nervous system. "Are you in pain?" "Not exactly," Kier managed, his voice rougher than intended. "It's more like everything's dialed up to 11. She moved closer, her silver hair brushing his shoulder. "The crystals enhance our natural abilities. For my people, it's normal. For you." Her fingers traced the edge of a healing wound, drawing a sharp intake of breath from him. "It must be overwhelming." "You could say that." He caught her wrist, but instead of pushing her away, found himself pulling her closer. Is this part of your plan? Driving me crazy with whatever this is? Her obsidian eyes sparkled with mischief. Is it working? Before he could form a response, she pressed her lips to his. The contact was electric, literally. Energy surged between them, transforming every sensation into pure ecstasy. Kier gasped against her mouth, and she took advantage, deepening the kiss. His hands found her waist, pulling her against him as years of carefully maintained control shattered. She felt like lightning in his arms, dangerous and intoxicating. Every touch, every breath shared between them, built the energy higher. Orissa pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Now you're beginning to understand, she whispered against his lips. This is what you've been denying yourself. Not just pleasure, but true connection. This is insane, he breathed, but he was already chasing her lips again. We're being hunted, and I'm finally letting yourself feel. She pressed closer, her body fitting against his perfectly. Don't fight it, Kier. Let me show you what you're capable of. The next kiss was deeper, hungrier. The crystal chamber around them seemed to pulse in sync with their heartbeats. Kier felt like he was drowning and flying at the same time, lost in sensations he'd never imagined possible. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Orissa's eyes were glowing with inner light. The energy between us, she said, tracing his jawline. It's stronger than I expected. The artifacts chose well. Is that what this is? Kier asked, still holding her close. Just some alien energy thing? She smiled, pressing a softer kiss to the corner of his mouth. Number the energy enhances what's already there. It can't create feelings that don't exist. Before Kier could process the implications of that statement, distant explosions reminded them of their situation. Orissa sighed, reluctantly pulling away. We should keep moving, she said. The inner sanctum isn't far now. But as they continued their journey, something had fundamentally shifted between them. Every glance, every touch carried new weight. Kier found himself wondering if he'd finally found something worth risking everything for, or if he was just falling under some alien spell. Looking at Orissa, watching how she moved with deadly grace through her domain, he realized it didn't matter anymore. He was already hers, body and soul. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The inner sanctum rose before them like a cathedral carved from living crystal, its spires reaching toward a ceiling that seemed to touch the planet's surface. But instead of the sanctuary they'd hoped for, they found chaos. Bodies of Zavarian defenders lay scattered across the temple floor, and the invaders had already begun setting charges around the central altar. We're too late, Orissa breathed, her grip on Kier's hand tightening. They're going to destroy the heart chamber. Kier surveyed the scene, counting at least 20 heavily armed hostiles. Even with whatever this is between us, those aren't great odds. There's another way. Orissa turned to face him, her black eyes intense. A complete merger of our energies. It would give us the power to stop them, but, she hesitated, it would change you forever. The human mind isn't meant to experience such totality of sensation. Would it save your people? Save this? He gestured to the temple around them, to the crystal heart of her world. Yes, but Kier, you don't understand. The pleasure, the pain, everything you felt so far would be nothing compared to this. Some humans have gone mad from far lesser connections. He caught her face between his hands. Hey, look at me. I crossed that line the moment I jumped in front of those arrows for you. Whatever happens next, I'm all in. Her eyes searched his face before she nodded. Then kiss me, warrior of Earth. Let me show you what it means to truly become one. Their lips met, and the world exploded into pure sensation. This wasn't like their earlier kisses. This was like being struck by lightning, like diving into a sun. Every nerve ending in Kier's body ignited. He felt Orissa's consciousness merge with his, felt centuries of Zavarian wisdom and power flood his system. When they separated, Kier saw the world through new eyes. The crystal matrix of the temple glowed with living energy. He could feel every vibration, every pulse of power. More importantly, he could feel Orissa not just beside him, but within him, their energies intertwined completely. Still with me? She asked, her voice echoing both in his ears and his mind. That depend, he managed, marveling at how even his voice seemed to carry harmonic overtones now. Am I supposed to be seeing in about 12 dimensions? Her laugh rippled through their shared consciousness. Focus. Direct the energy like I'm showing you. The invaders had noticed them now, weapons rising. Time seemed to slow as Kier felt Orissa guiding him, showing him how to channel the overwhelming sensations into pure power. The first shots fired at them simply dissolved in the energy field surrounding their bodies. They moved as one, each action perfectly synchronized. Where Kier struck, Orissa's energy followed, transforming brute force into devastating waves of power. Where she danced through their enemies' ranks, his combat instincts guided her movements. The altar! Orissa's voice rang in his mind. We have to reach it before the charges detonate. They fought their way toward the center of the temple, their shared power growing with each step. Kier had never felt anything like this. Every wound they received translated into pure energy. Every hit they landed resonated through both their bodies. It was overwhelming, intoxicating, terrifying in its intensity. The leader of the invaders stepped forward, wearing some kind of energy-dampening armor. The alien witch has corrupted another one, he spat. This is why these abominations must be destroyed. Kier felt Orissa's pain at the words, felt her memories of her people being hunted, their sacred sites desecrated. His rage merged with hers, creating something new and powerful. The only abomination here, Kier growled, his voice carrying harmonics that shattered nearby crystal shards, is your fear of what you don't understand. The final battle was brutal. The leader's armor protected him from their energy attacks, forcing them to fight physically while maintaining their connection. Each blow that landed sent cascading waves of sensation through their merged consciousness. But together they were unstoppable. When the leader finally fell, Kier felt no satisfaction, only a deep sadness for such willful ignorance. They reached the altar just as the first charges began to detonate. Orissa placed her amulet in the central socket, and Kier added his artifact beside it. Their combined energy surged through the temple's crystal matrix, creating a cascading reaction that spread throughout the planet. The sensation was beyond anything Kier had ever experienced. Every pleasure, every pain he'd ever felt paled in comparison to this moment of pure connection, not just with Orissa, but with Shavira itself. He felt the planet's pain, its joy, its ancient wisdom. And through it all, he felt Orissa's love flowing through him, anchoring him in the storm of sensation. When it was over, when the temple had been cleansed and the invaders defeated, they stood together at the altar, their energies still merged. Kier knew he should feel different, should feel damaged or changed by the experience. Instead, he felt complete. You're not running away screaming, Orissa observed, her fingers intertwined with his as they stood before the restored altar. The temple hummed with renewed energy, crystal formations slowly repairing themselves around them. Most outsiders would have lost their minds by now. Kier pulled her closer, marveling at how their energies still resonated even after the merger had faded. Maybe I lost my mind the moment I met you. Would explain a lot. Is that your way of saying you don't regret it? Her obsidian eyes sparkled with amusement and something deeper. Regret saving the most fascinating woman in the galaxy? Not likely. He traced the line of her jaw, feeling the subtle electric charge that still passed between them. Though I might regret not asking what the hell I'm supposed to do now, pretty sure my mercenary career is shot after this. Orissa pressed a kiss to his palm, sending a cascade of pleasurable sensations up his arm. Stay, she said simply. There's so much more to learn about our ways, about what we could become together. That's a pretty bold proposition, considering we just met while being shot at. Says the man who merged his entire consciousness with mine an hour ago. Her smile turned mischievous. Besides, you can't tell me you're not curious about what else our connection could do. As if to demonstrate, she sent a wave of energy through their linked hands that made Kier's knees weak. That's not fighting fair. Since when do mercenaries fight fair? She pressed closer, her body fitting against his perfectly. Stay, Kier. Help me rebuild. Help me show others that our ways aren't something to fear, but something to embrace. Looking into her eyes, feeling the remnants of their connection still humming between them, Kier realized she was right. Everything that had driven him before, the endless wandering, the emotional walls, the desperate need to keep moving, it all seemed hollow compared to what he'd found here. "You know," he said, pulling her into a kiss that sent crystal chimes resonating through the temple. "For the first time in my life, staying in one place sounds like the biggest adventure of all." Her laugh echoed through the chamber as she deepened the kiss, and Kier felt the last of his old self fall away. He'd come to Javira as a mercenary looking for a payday. He was staying as something else entirely, someone who had finally learned that the deepest wounds could become the strongest connections, and that sometimes the greatest strength lay in allowing yourself to feel everything. As the twin sun set outside, casting the temple in sheets of copper light, Kier held Orissa close and looked forward to discovering exactly what everything could mean. As the temple quieted and the crystal formations continued their slow repair, Kier and Orissa found themselves drawn to a private meditation chamber off the main hall. Bioluminescent crystals cast an intimate blue glow across their skin as they stood together, still processing everything that had happened. "The energy merger," Orissa said softly, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest that left trails of tingling sensation. "It usually fades completely after use. But with you," she looked up at him in wonder, "the connection remains." Kier drew her closer, feeling that familiar electric resonance building between them. "Maybe because I don't want it to fade." Their kiss was gentler than before, but no less intense. Without the urgency of battle, they could explore the connection fully. Each touch generated cascading waves of shared sensation. Through their lingering bond, Kier could feel Orissa's emotions mixing with his own. Wonder, desire, a deepening affection that defied their brief time together. "Show me," he whispered against her lips. "Show me everything." Orissa smiled and pressed her palm to his chest, directly over his heart. Energy flowed between them, not the overwhelming surge of their combat merger, but something more intimate, more controlled. Kier gasped as new sensations bloomed across his consciousness. "This is how my people share themselves completely," she murmured, guiding his hand to mirror her position. "No barriers, no fears, just pure connection." Their energies intertwined once again, but this time it wasn't about power or combat. This was about understanding, about experiencing each other on the deepest possible level. Every touch, every kiss became amplified through their shared connection. Time lost meaning as they explored this new dimension of their bond. Through their merged consciousness, they shared not just sensation but memory, hope, dream. Kier saw Orissa's childhood among the crystal spires, felt her love for her world and her people. She experienced his years of wandering, understanding now why he'd built those walls around his heart and why he was finally ready to let them fall. When they finally separated, both breathing heavily, their bodies humming with shared energy, Kier rested his forehead against hers. "I think I understand now," he said, "why your people consider pain and pleasure just different forms of the same energy. It's all about connection." "Yes," she replied, running her fingers through his hair, sending little sparks of pleasure down his spine. "And now you'll never experience either alone again." "Promise?" Her smile held all the mystery and beauty of Shavira itself. "Promise." As night fell outside the temple, they remained wrapped in each other's arms, their energies still dancing between them. They had all the time in the world now to explore this connection, to learn its depths and possibilities. And for the first time in his life, Kier was exactly where he wanted to be. In the privacy of the meditation chamber, their energy bond continued to deepen. Every caress, every shared breath created new sensations that rippled through both their bodies. The crystal walls seemed to pulse in harmony with their merged consciousness, amplifying their connection. "Tell me what you're feeling," Orissa whispered, her fingers tracing the scars on his chest. Each touch sent waves of pleasure through their bond. "Everything," Kier breathed, drawing her closer. "It's like I've been seeing in black and white my whole life, and suddenly everything's in color." His hand found the curve of her waist, feeling the subtle electric charge of her skin. "Is it always like this for your people?" She shook her head, silver hair cascading over her shoulders. "Number this is unique, special. Her obsidian eyes met his. Like you. Their lips met again, and the energy between them surged. Through their connection, Kier could feel her joy, her wonder at finding someone who could share this level of intimacy. His own emotions reflected back through their bond, creating an endless loop of shared sensation. The crystals around them began to sing, resonating with their combined energy. Orissa smiled against his lips. "The temple approves," she murmured. "It recognizes true union." Their bond deepened further as they explored this new dimension of their connection. Physical and spiritual boundaries blurred until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Every touch, every kiss carried the weight of shared consciousness, of complete understanding. Through their merged minds, they shared not just sensation, but essence. Kier experienced Orissa's deep connection to her world, her fierce protectiveness of her people's traditions. She felt his years of loneliness, his search for something meaningful, and his joy at finally finding it with her. The morning light filtered through the crystal spires of their private chambers in the temple, casting rainbow patterns across the bed. Kier woke to find Orissa watching him, her obsidian eyes holding an unusual sparkle. "You're staring," he murmured, pulling her closer. The energy between them hummed pleasantly, their bond having grown stronger with each passing day. "Something has changed," she said, taking his hand and placing it over her abdomen. Through their connection, he felt it immediately. A new resonance, a third energy signature pulsing gently beneath his palm. Kier's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Is that... are you... Our energies have created something unprecedented," Orissa said softly, her voice filled with wonder. "A child of both worlds. The temple's crystals confirmed it last night." "I didn't think it was possible," he breathed, feeling the tiny spark of life through their bond. "Human and Zavarian. Our bond transcends normal biological barrier," she explained, covering his hand with hers. "The energy merger we share, it's changed us both on a fundamental level, created new possibilities." Kier pulled her into a gentle kiss, feeling her joy and nervousness mixing with his own through their connection. When they parted, he couldn't help but grin. "Well, I guess this means I'm definitely staying." "As if you were going anywhere," she teased, but he felt her relief through their bond. "No one in recorded history has witnessed such a union," she continued more seriously. "Our child will be unique, a bridge between worlds, just like our love. Good thing they'll have the two most stubborn parents in the galaxy to guide them," Kier said, drawing her close again. Through their connection, he sent waves of love and protection, feeling them resonate not just with Orissa, but with the new life they'd created. 1 year later, the twin sons of Javira painted the crystal spires in shades of amber and rose as Kier stood on the temple's highest balcony, holding his infant daughter. Her skin was a pale jade, lighter than her mother's, and her eyes shifted between human hazel and Zavarian black, depending on her mood. Right now they sparkled with delight as she reached for the floating crystal fragments that danced in the air around them, a trick she'd somehow mastered before learning to crawl. "She's showing off again," Orissa's amused voice came from behind him. Through their bond, he felt her pride and love wash over him as she joined them. "Like mother, like daughter," Kier smiled, feeling their child's energy signature harmonize with both of theirs. They'd named her Zyra Eth, a blend of ancient Zavarian words meaning light born of two stars, though Kier often called her Zira for short. The name suited her perfectly, as her power manifested in sweeping waves of light through the crystal matrices. "The Council's latest readings are fascinating," Orissa said, wrapping her arms around them both. "She's developing her own unique way of channeling energy, neither purely human nor Zavarian, but something entirely new." Zyreth gurgled happily, sending a pulse of pure joy through their shared connection that made the nearby crystals chime in response. She was already stronger than anyone had predicted, her hybrid nature allowing her to interact with Shavira's energy in ways that surprised even the eldest masters. "You know," Kier said, watching his daughter orchestrate her private crystal symphony, "a year ago, if someone had told me I'd end up as a father to a half-alien, energy-manipulating baby, You'd have shot them? Orissa teased. Probably. He turned to face her, their child cradled between them. But now I can't imagine any other life. Through their bond, memories flowed. Their first meeting in the desert, the battle for the temple, their energy merger, the wonder of discovering Zereth's existence, and all the moments since, both challenging and beautiful. Their love had changed not just them, but had opened new possibilities for both their peoples. Other human Zavarian couples had begun to emerge, inspired by their story. The temple had become a center of study for understanding these new connections, these bridges between worlds. Zyreth would grow up in a universe more united than the one they'd known. The council wants to document our journey, Orissa said softly, to share with future generations. What should we tell them? Kier looked at his family, his fierce, beautiful warrior priestess, and their miracle child, who represented hope for two civilizations. Through their three-way bond, he felt their combined energy singing with possibility. Tell them that sometimes the greatest adventures come from letting yourself feel everything, he said. That pain can become pleasure, enemies can become family, and love. He kissed Orissa as Zyreth giggled between them. Love can transform entire worlds. Above them, the crystal spires of their home resonated with their shared joy, a symphony of light and energy that echoed across the desert plains of Shavira. Their story was just beginning, but already it had changed the fate of two species forever. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, other hearts waited to discover what they too might become when they dared to feel everything. Dear listeners, what you've just experienced is more than just a tale of sci-fi romance. It's a story about the courage to change, to feel, and to connect. Like Kier, many of us build walls around our hearts, turning emotional scars into barriers rather than bridges. We fear pain, avoid vulnerability, and sometimes forget that our deepest wounds can become our greatest sources of strength. This story challenges us to consider, what if the very things we run from are actually doorways to profound connection? What if our scars, both physical and emotional, aren't meant to be hidden, but rather transformed into something beautiful? In a world that often encourages us to numb our pain, to maintain safe distances, and to protect ourselves at all costs, He Stepped in Front of Flying Arrows reminds us that true strength might lie in the opposite direction. It's about having the courage to feel everything, the pain, the pleasure, the fear, and the love, and allowing those feelings to transform us. Whether you're dealing with past hurts, facing current challenges, or simply wondering if there's more to life than emotional safety, remember Kier's journey. Sometimes the greatest adventures begin when we stop running and start embracing the very things that scare us most. Perhaps your own Shavira isn't a distant planet with crystal spires, but rather the unexplored territory of your own heart. Perhaps your arrows are the risks you need to take, and your Orisa is whatever or whoever calls you to be more than you thought possible. The question isn't whether you have scars. We all do. The question is, are you ready to let them become bridges rather than barriers? Are you prepared to step in front of your own arrows, not because it's safe, but because something beautiful waits on the other side of that courage? The story might be fiction, but the truth it carries is real. Sometimes the deepest wounds can lead to the most profound connections, and the bravest thing we can do is allow ourselves to be transformed by love. Your next chapter awaits. Are you ready to begin your own transformation, with hope and encouragement for all who dare to feel deeply and love boldly?